I was in jail when I was 14 because I break the curfew. And anyone was in jail for once, he's in the Israeli blacklist. I'm not allowed to get permission to travel. Every Palestinian had to get permission to travel. So I'm not allowed to travel freely outside the West Bank. But with other kind of restrictions, I didn't leave Bethlehem since 1997 and never been outside the West Bank all my life. I'm sure that I'm not a unique case. There are so many Palestinians like me.
When people are frustrated on all levels, you will find them that they just want a release. And since it's a male-dominant society, and since violence became like a daily habit from the occupation, and people got used to this issue, domestic violence increased. We cannot ignore the issue of the difficult political situation and affecting the increase in domestic violence within the Palestinian society. It's hard not to associate them together. You're talking about a curfew, you're talking about like hundreds of days in the same house. People are frustrated, no money. At some point there was no food, and very nervous, very tensed. So you can imagine. Now with the beginning of the Second Intifada and with the increase in Israeli human violations against the Palestinians, where many people were killed, they were assassinated, bloodshed increased, homes were demolished, lands were confiscated, people became more and more conservative, especially in the rural areas.
Israeli dictionary and the Palestinian dictionary is different. As example, when you are saying peace, Israelis understand that peace is to stop the Palestinian fighting. When you are telling any Palestinian the word peace, he means that the Israeli occupation has to go. So everyone use the same word with different meaning.
In 2002, Israel started constructing what she calls the security fence or the security wall. We can see that actually from the map and also on the ground that only 20% is on the green line. Those are settlement blocks inside the West Bank. It makes one wonder really, is it about security or it's about having more Palestinian land in this from the West Bank.
It's all about ghettoizing the Palestinian people within these ghettos and reservations. Particularly the main interesting thing that we can talk about the wall is in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem we talk about 122 kilometers of walls, which is encircling the Palestinian neighborhoods within and villages within Jerusalem itself and around it. It's clear what's going on in Jerusalem that goes along with the laws that they started to launching now is totally I would say that is the last step of the ethnic cleansing that's going on in Jerusalem. Because totally separating the Palestinians from their people around, from the rest of the Palestinian people from Jerusalem, from the West Bank. It means that you just take any means of the life to continue in Jerusalem for these people. if you look at Masha from all sides, wall is surrounding it and isolating most of its land that historically these people depend in their life, on their land, on their olives that have been totally isolated now. This is the plan. From the situation of Masha, you can read what the situation will be.
من أمام جدار الفصل العنصري بأن هذا الجدار يشكل وصمة عار في جبين كل الأحرار في هذا العالم. نرجو من الجميع. First, we are appreciate for the international group and the Israeli group who share us our struggle against the war. We are in non-violent demonstration today to hear our voice to the whole of the world. We are against this policy. يجوا ويشوفوا الإجرام. يكون بمقدمة المسيرة all of the people here are in a civil demonstration, non-violent demonstration. شو صوتي أفكار لك ما لك بتسكن شطح فلسطيني فاتي ارميها برجلك يا تيسك ما تيسك اسحب ارفع الحديد خليه خليه
أكل زلابي هذا بالأحمر.
لا ولا شو تسوي هم بدهم اثنين اليهود ياخذوهم بس ولا مجات ولا يا كلب ايه امر ورق الزعان ده انا ما نيجي نطخ عليك في الليل والله الأمان بعيد
هنا في ناس بدية ومسحة ومتسلطة كلها بتكون.
هو وشلحوها أوعيها عند المحل فوق مليان يصور الوقت صار غير
If you ask me, the Palestinian people want the non-violence movement? Of course, yes. But Israel arrested the leaders of these movements, dismissed them, they stopped them in the airport, and they dismiss them outside, and they don't want any non-violence movement here.
Why?
Maybe because they will clear the picture in front of the world.
Nonviolence will keep the humanity, or try to keep the humanity in both sides of the conflict. If I face the Israeli soldier in a non-violent way, maybe that will make him think at least of why am I doing this against other human beings who are not hurting me. What I believe is that occupation is bad for both sides, and maybe by using non-violence methods we will make the Israeli society themselves know and learn more about the bad face of the occupation that dehumanizes the Israeli person himself and the Israeli soldier himself.
As a Palestinian, we just met soldiers. We have the chance to meet just soldiers and just in the checkpoints and just facing problems with the Israeli. We haven't anything nice from the Israeli side. So we have in our minds and in our hearts that the Israeli side, they are totally violent people and they are against us because we face this every day.
Since I refused to serve because I was in the army for a year and a half, been able to deal with that violence much more constructively by engaging in dialogue, looking at the real issues from which violence comes from, be it the occupation, be it the violation of human rights, be it by the perpetration of violence by the media. I'm sure there's some soldiers who are very personally committed to doing the best job professionally, etc. But I think the whole surrounding of the army and the things that the army need to impose, things like checkpoints and home demolitions and assassinations, will make any soldier begin to lose that commitment to being professional, to being civil. And we can really see that in our society. And it's something we really have to deal with, and it's something that affects not just Palestinians and Lebanese and our so-called enemies, but also affects us internally as well. That violence comes back into our societies, into our homes.
When the first Intifada started, I was 17 years old. It was in 1987. And I don't know, and I don't remember why, but I didn't think twice. Immediately when it started, I found myself in the street throwing stones at the Israeli soldiers. At the first time, I remember I was afraid to death because it was like good citizen, so with total obedience to the Israeli authority, and then one day finding myself in the street throwing stones and saying no to the occupation. And soon after, like 6 months after the beginning of the Intifada, because of my involvement in daily demonstrations and throwing stones, plus many other things, they came and I was arrested and spent time in the prison for I stayed like 6 months in the prison. I was released, and it's amazing because we had a contest that time, who's the first one will go back to the street, who's the faster that will go back to the street after being released in the prison. So I remember maybe after like 2 hours from my release, I went outside with my friends to throw stones at the Israeli soldier. They came to arrest me again, and I realized that I'm going to be arrested, so I stopped sleeping at my house. And when they came, they didn't find me, and that's how I became wanted. I stayed wanted for about 2 years, till 1991. During that period, I was shot. They tried to catch me. I refused to stop because I don't want them to catch me. They shot me. Thank God I wasn't killed, although I think he intended to kill me.
Were you shot with live ammunition?
Live ammunition, yeah. I was shot in my ass. After like 1 year of rehabilitation, I was able to walk again. The last 10 years of the 90s, I focused mostly on education.
What are your 2 master's degrees in?
Peace and development and conflict transformation.